The College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University has named an individual from the class of 1977 as its Alumni Fellow for 2019. He had a long and storied career at Auburn University in Alabama, and he's with us now to share that story and to talk about the state of his craft. Gatz Riddell. Gatz, congratulations on this recognition, first of all.
Thank you very much, Eric.
You are a native Kansan. You grew up in central Kansas,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Tell about that.
Well, I was raised on a farm. There's a homesteaded farm outside of Conway, Kansas, which no longer exists. This is about 5 miles from McPherson, Kansas. And went to Conway grade school for 6 years until they closed it. It was a 2-room school, grades 1 through 4 in one room and 5 through 8 in another room, and closed it, and we got incorporated into the McPherson school system. Well, raised on a beef cattle, some dairy, alfalfa, and wheat farm.
So you were exposed to the gamut of the farming experience then, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was a major. My grandfather, we have a picture of the house they built when they first homesteaded it, and he was I think 2 years old, and this is in 1888, and he was sorely disappointed when I left to go to college because he just thought he had gotten me to be trained to be a farmer, and actually as we talk, you'll find out pretty much whatever I've done, I've gotten almost good enough to be something, then I've moved on to something else.
Maybe an exaggeration there. We'll talk about that. What led you to think about pursuing a career in the area of animal health?
It was 2 role models I had before I ever knew what a role model was. Being raised on the farm with cattle, my parents had 2 really good friends, Dr. M.F. Scobie and Dr. V.D. Lundstrom, who practiced in the McPherson area, and I think because they're friends, they didn't choose one or the other. They just kind of alternated between the 2 veterinarians, and the way they conducted themselves and taking care of animals. Back in the days where James Herriot was just becoming known for his stories, well, actually before that, I actually knew what I wanted to do when I was 5, and it was because those 2 role models, Dr. Lundstrom and Dr. Scobie.
You wanted to be a veterinarian? Was it even more specific than that? A bovine practitioner? What?
Well, I didn't know what a bovine practitioner was. In fact, I worked for an association, the American Association of Bovine Practitioners, and one of our challenges is 99% of the public doesn't know what a practitioner is. They know what a veterinarian is, and we thought about going through a name change, but that didn't work out with some of our members. So I knew I really liked cattle. I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. When I went through vet school, I enjoyed every rotation. Small animal, large animal, even equine, though I don't want many people to know that these days. So I enjoyed everything, and just some events directed me down the path towards cattle medicine.
We'll talk of those. You were here and finishing your DVM in the 70s. Who were the greatest influences on your path at that time?
You are probably at least familiar with the legacy of Dr. John Nordze. And Dr. Nordze interviewed me, and he had actually left the clinic the year I got into clinics, and was in the dean's office. But he had a graduate student, Kent Ames, who is an Ohio State graduate, and then spent his career, Dr. Ames, it's hard for me to call him Kent, he graduated with his master's in the same ceremony that I got my DVM. And in the fall of 1976, Kent was working on his master's thesis project, which was trying to discern which was the best way to fix a broken femur in a newborn calf. At that time, there had been some continental breeds coming to the United States, Charolais, etc. They're large. And because of difficult births, there were calves showing up with broken femurs because the difficult births or dystocias. And Ken had a project. He enrolled, he didn't coerce. He talked myself and one of my classmates, I believe Dr. Rich Long, into helping take care of the calves and helping do the surgeries. And along the way, not too long before the end of the year, he said, "Why don't you think about applying for an internship?" My whole goal in life was twofold. One, graduate and never ever open a book again. And 2, go back and go into practice with Dr. Lundstrom, because Dr. Scobie's son graduated 2 years before I did and had gone into Dr. Scobie's practice. So I was going to go back and practice with Dr. Lundstrom. That's all there was to it. And I thought about it, and actually my mom said, maybe it's not that great idea to leave home, go to school, and then come right back home. I don't think she meant for me to take a 45-year detour through the South. But so I applied for internships, and it was a very different process back then. And the day came where the parties at the universities that had internships started calling early in the morning, and my goal really was I preferred, I don't know why, to get an internship at the University of Saskatchewan, which is pretty chilly. And one of my classmates actually got that internship, and Dr. Don Walker from Auburn called and offered it to me, and I thought about it for an hour or so, and then I had nothing better to do, so I said yes.
What was that experience about then, as an intern at Auburn then?
I was really fortunate. There was an outgoing resident who taught me a lot. Dr. Walker and another mentor I had there, Dr. Hudson, taught me a tremendous amount about veterinary medicine, but they also taught me a lot about life. And after my year of internship, I stayed on because I think unless you were blatantly abnormal, you got a shot to stay on and do a residency. And the strength in the food animal section at that time wasn't medicine, it wasn't surgery, it was theriogenology. So I worked on a residency in theriogenology, which is the study of reproduction, and stayed there until 1981. And then I really disappointed Dr. Walker, and I just had to go into practice. I remember him telling me, I know you just feel like you have to go in practice, but quite honestly, Eric, I was younger than most of the students. When I graduated from Kansas State, I was 23, and most of the students in the senior class at Auburn when I got there were older than I was. And so here's this young, wet behind the ear, green kid trying to teach him something. And I felt like a fraud saying that, well, you do it this way, when I'd never been in practice. I actually think that's a lesson that our universities could take to heart today, because having a little bit of practice experience when you're trying to create practitioners might be a good thing.
So you took off for Tennessee
In
to
81,
practice?
Yeah, my wife was in the class of 79. She's a veterinarian also. And she graduated in 79. She practiced for a year in East Tennessee. Then we got married, and I left Auburn to catch up with her, and we practiced in two different areas of Tennessee until August of 1984, then got a chance to go back to Auburn as an assistant professor.
And specializing in bovine health, or?
Well, it's unique. The hospital at Auburn, I think is different than a lot of hospitals, is they were broken and they dealt with clients and patients along species lines, and along class lines. So you did beef cattle, or you did dairy cattle, or you did equine, or you could do small ruminants and pigs. And so the first 3.5 years I was there, I worked totally in the beef barn. And when I came back, I worked almost completely in the dairy area, except my mentors there, Dr. Walker and Dr. Hudson, had developed some very specialized reproductive surgery on bulls techniques, and I'd become at least trained in those areas. And so there are times after I came back into the dairy group that they needed somebody to do a specialized procedure, and so I do some beef, but it was mostly dairy when I came back from 84 until 2005 when I retired.
So 21 years at Auburn, and to condense this down, what do you look back on as the crowning moments of those 21 years?
Well, one, that I didn't become an administrator, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the students and the interaction, and even today we have students come back for Auburn class reunions, and we get to see them. And so that the fact that I was able to make a lot of contacts in the veterinary field, and it's also along that time where I was reminded of what another one of my professors at K-State, Dr. Russ Fry, had said. He was very, very strong in the area of organized veterinary medicine. And, I wasn't a joiner. I wanted to do veterinary medicine. I didn't really care about belonging to this organization or that organization. But somewhere along in the mid 1990s, I became involved with things that at one time I would not thought were part of veterinary medicine, where we dealt with issues like antimicrobial susceptibility, drug availability, actually having discussions with the FDA and USDA. and trying to collaborate between the food animal groups that have a little bit different approach to life, because our animals are ultimately going to go into the food chain and the other parts of the profession.
So navigating those waters.
Yes, sir.
It's a little bit delicate, perhaps, to put it that way.
Well, it is, and it's a challenge, because much like society, today's veterinary students and our colleagues are from an urban background. I was raised on a farm, so everything I always took for granted as natural and second nature, and that anybody with a lick of sense would know. Well, there's a lot of people with licks of sense today that don't know it just because they've not been exposed to it, and that requires a little sensitivity, which is a tough thing for me, and it requires some tact and some discussions and the ability to understand other perspectives.
Well, from the 32,000 foot view, to put it this way, what has changed in bovine health in the last 25, 30 years that you've been involved in it?
Well, I was at a meeting in Atlanta that was, this is after I left Auburn. I was working for the American Association of Bovine Practitioners, and the meeting was sponsored by the CDC, FDA, and USDA, because they had a conjoint project called NARMS. It's a National Animal Microbial Resistance Monitoring System. And people from all over the world were there. And one lady from Department of Health in one of the northern tier states, not that just because I live in Auburn now there's any difference between north and south, but there is a Mason-Dixon line. And she got up and said to the veterinarians in the audience, if you could apply the principles of preventive medicine as well as human physicians do, which was totally untrue, because the concept of preventive medicine is just coming to human medicine. It's been developing very rapidly in food animal medicine, because we can't do the animals any good by having to treat them. We have to prevent disease. And the advances in preventing disease and knowing how you need to go about the care, nutrition, and treatment of animals to prevent disease, that's probably the greatest advance. Plus, the innate knowledge in food animal veterinarians today of what the components of food safety are, and the fact that we don't have an inherent right to feed the public. We have a responsibility. It's something that we need to earn that every day, and we don't just deserve to be able to do that. That's a challenge.
So you retired in 2005, but clearly have kept your hand in, still involved in the AABP and other entities. So what is the next challenge, or the challenge at hand today for that matter, that the beef cattle industry needs to face from the health management perspective?
Well, I didn't really just keep my hand in after 2005. The position I had with the American Association of Bovine Practitioners was their executive vice president, or as most associations would be, their executive director. So this organization of 5,000 veterinarians, I was the person who had to deal with their affairs, both membership services, their annual conference, their continuing education, as well as all their liaisons with FDA and USDA. And so that was one of the challenges I'll talk about tomorrow. But the challenge I think that food animal medicine faces is we have a lot of detractors. Pretty good example. Somebody posted a link. The ABP has a listserv that has 23 or 2,400 members of our members that are signed up, and so they see messages every day. And somebody posted a link about a lady who was in the business of creating vegan cheese just because she thought that was the right thing to do. And she talked about how you went through and used cashews to make the vegan cheese that she was creating, and how you could on an acre of land, you could produce 6,000 pounds worth of vegan cheese, whereas you could only produce on that same acre from a dairy, and you'd have similar correlations with the production of protein from beef. You could only produce 182 pounds of cheese. Just came out with that. And it went on listserv, and there's a couple people who said, well, I don't agree with that. That can't be. And finally, a really thoughtful veterinarian from Mableton, Washington, a guy named Dr. Bill Waverin, and he actually was on the dairy where the first case of mad cow disease was seen back in right before Christmas of 2003. He's an extremely deep thinking person. He said, well, so-and-so posted this, and there's been no discussion, and I just can't let it go. And he went through all the mathematics, how that was just total male bovine excrement, what she had put in her lake. And it was very interesting. And first, cashews are grown in a tropical area, which we don't have too much of in this part of the country, or in any parts of the country. So the challenges are not only don't people understand what we do in agriculture, there are active, well-funded entities that don't want us to be in animal agriculture, much less any other kind of agriculture, but especially not in animal agriculture. And they use a lot of different distracting things, such as animal welfare. And 30 years ago, our concept and our practices in animal welfare weren't good, but they are now. And they've improved tremendously. That's another improvement you can talk about in the last 20 or 30 years. And the care of animals today is great, but it's pretty easy to show a normal happenstance or occurrence on a beef or dairy cow operation that you or I would say, well, that's normal, that's what we do. And show it in a way that the average person who's never been on a farm says, well, that's horrible, that's horrendous. And so we have a lot of well-funded distractors. And so, whether or not you believe that lab-grown meat is going to be an issue, that's something I guess I'll have to see to believe. But that's an entity, and I don't think it's right for us to throw rocks at organic production. I don't think it's right for us to throw rocks at natural production or at plant-derived, quote-unquote, meats or lab-derived meats. I think everything should have its fair place in the marketplace.
Well, if the industry takes that diplomatic approach, how can it still counter the detractors? Any sage advice there?
Well, I think it's going to come down to something I said after I ate a really good steak at Elway's in Denver. I said, this is the best steak I've had that I hadn't cooked in a long time. I just don't think there's going to be the competition on the taste and chew aspects of how your palate likes to address the foods that it eats. And that's just me, and I'm sure I'm biased. Got to be up front, but I think we have a competitive product. I think when you look at the areas of sustainability, again, we've made some great advances by leaps and bounds in all areas of animal protein, and I think it's also our place to be able to develop the technologies, not the food, but the technologies to allow other parts of the world to feed their populations also. And just one thing that's so consistent across improving economic outlooks in developing countries is the desire for animal protein.
Well, Gatz, lastly, would like to have you express your thoughts upon being named the Alumni Fellow for the College of Veterinary Medicine 2019.
Well, it's very much an honor and one that I would have to say that I'm sure very few things I can speak with full confidence, even though my mom often described me as a person who's often wrong but never in doubt. I'm pretty sure that I don't deserve it, and my avocation these days is building houses for Habitat for Humanity, and I hope that this news never gets back to them, because I don't want to have to discuss it. But I'm truly honored, and I look down through the list of people that I know that have been honored in this way before, and it's quite humbling, and I am truly appreciative of this honor.
Well deserved. Congratulations to you. Thank you for the comments right here.
Thank you.
He is Dr. Gatz Riddell, and he spent 21 years on the faculty at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Auburn University, also a leader in the American Association of Bovine Practitioners, and he has been named the Alumni Fellow for the College of Veterinary Medicine 2019, a 1977 graduate with his DVM from Kansas State University.